we looked at teachers as these people that had their lives together.
Yes.
You look at these teachers and you look at these adults who you think
Have this all
are
together.
sophisticated. Then you grow up and then you have friends that are teachers and you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
They have none of their life in order. They are just as bad and
Yeah.
degenerate as anyone else.
And because they're an adult, it's this adult figure, and you feel like the information that they're giving you must be vetted and must be accurate. It's like food pyramid or whatever else they teach you, you never question. That's it. That's the story. And now we're like,
Yeah.
did you get the information yourself? Did somebody else tell you what it was?
100%.
Where did the information come from? So it is an interesting pivot that you
Yeah.
realize when you get to adulthood that the teachers are not actually necessarily the peak of society, right?
And that's what's interesting. And obviously, we are speaking to Drew Birch. Andrew, thank you so much for coming through. And you do a lot of work at schools, and that's just for the love of trying to help people become the best version of themselves through lessons that you've learned, growing up.
Yeah. So work with men in addiction therapy and performance enhancement, mostly into the UK and into the US. Normally high-performing individuals that have got a crutch or a handbrake that's stopping them from being as effective as they would otherwise like to be. And so the crux of the matter really is trying to make men as powerful as they can be, with the idea that as a man, it's our responsibility, it's our work, it's our purpose to become as powerful as possible, to be able to affect and influence your sphere of influence, right? To have that hand in society, to be the pillars of protectors, the pillars of protection, provision. And so the idea is to get into the schools before they start to make those mistakes that I made as a young man stepping into adulthood, and try and get them more dialed in before they have to take that dip in their performance, right?
Do you want to maybe speak on those mistakes that you maybe made, because we all made them?
Sure. No, 100%. I mean, I think one of the biggest issues is that when you're a high school boy, you have an external locus of control, right? Some other older guy tells you your rules. You can't vape. And so you don't vape, but maybe you sneak it around the corner because you're still a rebel and you still have this curious rebellion, right? Who are you to tell me that cocaine is bad for me? I'll let you know what I think, right? And we never stop to consider that the guys that have put the rules in place, have been there, have done that, have caught the consequences, and are actually trying to help.
Isn't that interesting how, growing up, your parents maybe are too strict, or you think that they don't have your best interests at heart, or you think, you don't know what it means to be a child.
There you go.
Whereas when you get older, you start to realize they actually did love me. They did actually care.
That's it. And so you kind of step out of varsity, you have this external locus. And then because you've been outsourcing your discipline for so long, you have this freedom, and the first person that offers you some fun, you grab onto, and you never consider the consequences. And then obviously I work with the guys now who are catching those consequences, whether it's, their marriage is on the rocks, financially they're struggling, they're not performing in their jobs the way they'd like to. And so we start to turn that around. We use physical training as a mechanism for that change, for overhauling identity, because we found that is one of the most effective ways to bring about that change, right? When you're working in addiction therapy, there are two effective mechanisms. One is an environmental change, and the other is an identity overhaul, not being the same guy who was caught up in those addictions. So enjoying the work and seeing a massive response, I think that our youth are very ready to hear what we have to say now. When you and I were in high school, we had the movie Project X, about a party. We had Blue Mountain State, was like one of the favorite series, right? About a party. Instagram had just come out and it was pushing the party. Girls, drugs, lifestyle.
Like those gym, I don't know if you were into like the gym scene as like following Ziz, Jeff Side, all of those oaks who we were exposed to on social media, where it was, I know for a fact when I started training, obviously it was kind of to help my rugby and all of that, but it was mainly in my mind while I'm training, I'm thinking, okay, I want to look better on the Saturday night for the party or whatever. 100%. And that's why I was training. And I would literally visualize the party while I was training, which would motivate me to train. But the purpose, or at least the motivation for training, was so wrong, because all it was the superficial look better to then maybe get the goal or whatever.
Get that validation. Right. Get aesthetically good looking and then get the validation from that. And so because our high schoolers have had that mindset when we were there, we stepped into adulthood, and that's kind of what the expectation was, and so that became our standard. And the big difference that we're seeing now is because of guys like for better or for worse, Andrew Tate, and those kind of guys, what they have done very effectively is they have they've stirred the hearts of the young man, and if nothing else, has made him realize that the best thing you can be doing is not chasing tail and drinking on the weekend. It's to get dialed in, to become dangerous, to become effective, to get your money up, to get your fitness up, to become focused. And so there's this seed planted, and by the time I step into the schools, there's this murmuring that's going on already. And so when I give them that direction, there's this change that happens, which is awesome to see.
So because obviously when we were around, we didn't have, obviously the public figures started coming into effect with the social media, with YouTube. I mean, YouTube blew up. It was like fitness YouTube.
Yeah.
And, our mindset was all just on that and looking better physically. What is the mindset of the kids now? Is it, because obviously you do still see a lot of youngsters in the gym, but is it more, and I mean, social media has also taken a big turn towards self-help and all of that.
Yeah.
Is it the mindset of seeking that? Obviously they are seeking that, but what are they consuming? Like, what is their, is it you coming in and speaking to them like, oh yeah, flip, he's actually right? Or is it them seeking it out before you even speak to them?
So what I do with the first talk is essentially adding vantage, so giving them new perspective, causing them to realize what the consequences are of certain actions. And I come in targeting pornography specifically. But I think that's one of the most detrimental lifestyle choices that a man can make. And as a young guy, we're curious, we have this urge, we haven't considered the consequences, and so we get hooked. It's a massive dopamine spike, massive opiate spike, just like any other hard drug. The guys get caught in it, path of least resistance, and it starts to program your mind, and eventually you end up as an NPC, a eunuch. And so I come in targeting that specifically, but effect a whole mindset change that they never really considered yet. And so it's adding vantage, it's enhancing perspicacity and giving a strategic position from which to take on the problem. And then we affect change through overhauling identity, through consistent daily action that starts to change your personhood and change your self-identity, right?
And I think, the porn aspect is a massive thing. People now, at least, I would say like the last 5 years, have been speaking about maybe the negatives of it. But, we've seen anyone that's watched YouTubers and vloggers and all of that have seen the adoption of working with these porn stars to, put up both of their names and obviously get more views on everything.
Yes.
But I do think now there's more people like the Andrew Tates who are speaking on the negative aspects of it in a large public forum. And there was, for a large time, people were like, don't talk down on porn.
Yes.
Porn is
entertainment.
You need to accept everyone's sexuality, allow them to do this. But that's the same as saying allow a kid to be on social media as much as they want, because who cares, or allow them to have their brain develop in any particular way. It's the same. Most parents limit the amount of social media, the amount of media, YouTube, whatever that the kids have. But the media's agenda in essence was just saying porn's cool. It's okay.
100%. We've had a very liberalized society, and the pendulum swings, right? It goes liberal, conservative, and it's swinging back to conservative. And it's interesting to see, part of that conservative nature is religious nature. And so there's a strong uptick in strong Christian male figures, but also strong Islamic figures. And Islam seems to actually have the upper hand in adoption rate right now. A lot of top influencers are going Islamic because Islam is intolerant. It doesn't accept the social narrative and go along with it. It's not
going to allow you to do the Last Supper at the opening ceremony in the Olympics.
Horrific, right? And then carrying on the trend with what's happened in the boxing, right? And I think that is a good representation for what's happening in society. But I think what's also interesting to see has been the outrage, the public outrage about the opening ceremony.
And what's nice is because it wasn't, a lot of the outrage wasn't Christians. Which is nice to see. It's not just the people that believe that particular religion that are outraged. It's general people. I mean, I saw Joe Rogan talking about it. And he's clearly an atheist. So it's him speaking about how pathetic it is, and the control and the, you know, people being robbed and all of that is nice to see, where it's not just the believers of the particular religion
100%.
fighting for understanding or respect, at least.
Yeah, and I think society as a whole swings back conservative. At least I'm seeing that in the high school boys. The high school boys are not just placidly starting to kind of say, I disagree. They're starting to openly say, I'm anti the LGBTQ plus agenda, which is interesting. They're starting to say, you know, I'm anti the party. The cool kids are getting dialed in and working now. I go to a school. I was at Parklands in Cape Town a couple of months ago, and there are 17-year-olds that are grafting and making money online already. And not just one or two. Like it's the culture of the school to be making cash yourself already as a high schooler. And I didn't have a clue when I was in high school. I didn't have any direction, so I don't think I was mentally there yet. But I think that's a great indication as to the content that they're picking up and the culture that they're picking up.
And you know that you speaking about Andrew Tate is good or bad impact in general. And I think that's exhibit A of good impact, because 100%. It's, yes, maybe there are negatives in terms of some people will think that, okay, that is a correct way to treat a woman, or I can have multiple girls or whatever. There are certain aspects that maybe become negative, but also there's more positive change that's come from it. The net gain is definitely,
I would say, positive
swaying
as well.
positive.
I don't think that he's being targeted by the powers that be because he made his money on camgirls and casinos. Loads of guys have. I think the reason he's being targeted is because he has started to stir up the hearts of the next generation of fighting age male. And if you're trying to have a world order that gives you leverage and power, you don't want your next generation of fighting age males to be powerful. You want them to be placid. You want them to be addicted and distracted. You know, watching the sport on the weekend, can name all 15 players, but can't do 15 push-ups, right? And we want our whole conversation to be about, you know, rugby or series or whatever it is, and not on what's happening around you. In fact, if you're the guy at the bar who's saying like, hey guys, you know, inflation's pretty bad right now. How are we earning extra cash? Like, those are like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Don't talk about that stuff.
The only inflation conversation that's having is your petrol's so expensive. Now I can't go away on a holiday or whatever. It's just negative. It's not, okay, this is the situation. How do we adapt? How do we improve?
That's it. And I'm interested to see the guys who are standing up to be the leaders in what is coming, right? Because society is not going to get any easier. Times aren't going to get easier right now, but the strong men are definitely standing up. And I think as men, we're all supposed to be leaders in our families and in our spheres, to whatever degree of influence that is. We should all be leading, and then it's our responsibility to lead effectively, right? So if all I'm doing is playing golf and fine dining, how effective does that make me in the rest of life, right? That feels like distraction time. So I think all the guys should be exercising, should be not just exercising for aesthetics, but exercising for functionality. If it's your job,
even if it's just a mindset change.
And if it's your responsibility as a man to be a protector and a provider, how effectively can you protect yourself and your family? Are you outsourcing that responsibility to forces that you know are inept and subpar? And what are you going to do when you actually need to be able to protect and provide? I think as a guy, we should be able to handle ourselves in a combative situation and be able to last in the combative situation, right? And then also have the mindset that is able to make money as independently as possible, right? But then also to not think that it's young money, cash money, young millionaire, go get a Lamborghini and the best watch you can just to be able to flash it.
I think that's also the biggest thing, is because of social media, we see these people with money that show off and flex to get more followers, because that is effective. In getting followers, it is very effective to rent a car, to have people assume that it's your car, to rent the house, have people assuming that you own the house, because it helps. And then young people will then look at this and be like, okay, if I start my business now, I can have that too. And then in reality, you realize that takes lots of work. It's the 0.1% that are fortunate enough to make that amount of money young. And then when they do, it also has the negative effects. I mean, we've seen, like, if we look at Jake Paul's full circle, or not full circle, but his
character arc.
He's developed so much. There are still certain things that I think is a little bit silly, but from where he was to where he is now, and what has he done? He's implemented some form of fighting. He's implemented training. He's implemented surrounding himself with like-minded individuals that want to help the whole. He's influenced all of these people. He's focused on lowering his ego. He's doing all of these things which people look at and think like, oh, that's too much work or that's too much effort. But look how much growth. And he's definitely got a new, because I originally liked Logan.
As well.
I like Logan. Now Logan he's changed a lot. Whereas with Jake, I never liked him because he was like a clown.
Yes.
And then now I really like Jake because I can see the people that he's working with, the spirituality he's trying to find within himself.
He's built his character. He really has done a lot of developmental work. And like you said, I think that the physical training aspect is so important to personal development, right? So when we're working with guys, and my focus isn't to try and make you as aesthetically built as possible. My use for exercise is, and it started off for myself, and that's where Gargan's challenge actually came from for me, is for building the mind, right? I bring about voluntary discomfort. Gargan's calls it a cookie in the cookie jar. Alex Hormozy talks about you become confident by stacking wins. And I think an amazing way, an easy way, the most effective way is to bring about voluntary discomfort and then make those wins, get those wins in our physical training. I think it's just the easiest way to do that.
It is.
And I think Jake's done something similar, right? He's built that in training. And I think the confidence that comes with being an effective boxer on the stage must be massive for self-identity as well, right? You're not just wealthy, you're actually effective at something too. So I think he's done really, really well over there. And I mean, you're obviously no stranger to physical training. You're obviously big on that scene as well.
And that's also, I've tried to also have a character arc of, when I first started training, I mentioned earlier, obviously in the school times, it was 100% aesthetic, try get the goal. Then it was bodybuilding, 100% aesthetic, maybe not to get the goal, but to be better looking, irrespective of function actually, than the next person on stage. Whereas now, when I got it, because I did a white collar boxing match, it was like 2 years ago or something.
Yeah, I remember you talking about it.
And then it had to be obviously to be able to perform.
Yes.
Then I got into running. Then my training completely changed because I can't train like a bodybuilder anymore. I need to focus on flexibility. I need to focus on, lengthening my muscles, making sure that I can do speed work, and it completely changed. Where, I mean, I lost 14 kilograms of muscle. But so that was a difficult transition for me to go through, losing 14 kilograms of muscle from, I wouldn't say I was known for being big, but I was known for being a bodybuilder, at least on social media.
A lot of personal identity and looking amazing.
And that was, and I was actually very fortunate to have been going through a breakup at the time as well.
Some fuel.
There was some fuel, and there was also real self-discovery that needed to happen, because I needed to find out firstly, who was I without this girl? Who was I as a person when you don't have this person next to you? Because when you see someone, you're with your girlfriend, you start to become, pretty codependent at times. Not all relationships, obviously, but you do become codependent where when you go to gym, you go together. When you go to shops, you go together. When the person's not there, it's like, well, I can't watch our shows. I can't do this. I can't. So it was, our whole identity was built around each other. And then the breakup happened. I got more into running. And then I was like, okay, I'm losing muscle. Who am I? Got more into, philosophy and truly trying to discover who I am, because there was always like a superficial, I love hard work, I love training, I love business, but it wasn't really who I was. I want to be so much more than just what the world sees, because when the world's not there, when the doors are closed, who are you?
And are you fulfilled when you look in the mirror? Who's the guy that you see? Because you can't fool the man in the mirror. And if you don't like who you see there, I think that's when you start to escape from who you are. And then we kind of slip back into all of those vices, right? And if we can build an identity that we're happy with, that we like when we look in the mirror, it makes it easier to cut those things off.
And I think in building that identity, you've mentioned easiest way is just to start training some form. Some form of physical activity. Doesn't have to become, who you are as a person or your main focus, but just breaking a sweat, focusing a little bit more on maybe eating less or eating more of the right things, then and that's also why I was fortunate, and I don't regret being in bodybuilding at all. Sometimes I see some of my old videos flexing on stage, and I'm actually embarrassed to be associated with those videos. But also, I don't want to ever regret anything because everything happens for a reason and leads you to who you are as a person. But seeing some of these videos, I'm like, that is pretty cringe. I think that is cringe personally for myself. Anyone who wants to do it, do it. But for myself, I didn't enjoy looking back on those things. And you just start to realize, you know, you did need to be that person to become the person you are today.
Yeah. And I think bodybuilding is such an interesting one because on the one hand, you're building yourself, but it's complete ego, right? You're building ego. You're saying like, I want to look good. I'm building my body for me. But then there's this other aspect that I think in terms of, for example, a recovering addict, somebody who was just, you know, maybe a wake and bake stoner or an alcoholic or something like that. And it's an opportunity for them to better themselves, almost objectively. It's like, I know that for a fact, I look better and I perform better now than I used to. And then I kind of have a bit of space for it. Right? There's a point when it's like, it's all ego. It's me on stage. Look at me. I look at my muscles. I'm amazing. But then there's this other angle that's like, I hated myself. I was looking for escape. And now when I look in the mirror, I'm proud of something that I've built. And it's taken consistent effort. It's taken consistent discomfort. And this is the reward of that. So I have got a little bit of space for bodybuilding. I want to look good when I'm on the beach. I think naturally there's going to always be a little bit of ego there. And I'm actually putting on weight now because I want to look better when I'm on stage. I want to have more muscle. I was doing a bit of jiu-jitsu and I was fighting at 76. And so I couldn't really try and put on mass. And now I've stepped out of that completely. And now I'm taking the opportunity to try and put on some size with the intent to, yes, muscle makes power, which is, I want to be more physically powerful. But a lot of it is definitely about that ego of I want to look a bit better when I'm on stage.
But it's also, it's a balance because it's, you know, you do need to have ego to fuel yourself sometimes. You do need to be a little bit threatened by someone and be like, okay, actually, I need to work harder. You know, ego is an amazing driving force. And also, it's also about your intention. So for me, my intention with bodybuilding and why I actually cringe at some of the videos is because I was so clearly looking for validation. And it was, I thought it was for myself. I thought all these things, but it was actually just me wanting to look better than that guy, not to feel proud for myself, but to have other people acknowledge, okay, Jesse looks better than him.
No, I hear you. And I think that's the big pivot. But I mean, what a character arc to be able to recognize that and acknowledge that. I think so many guys struggle to be self-aware enough to look at who they are now and the changes that we could make. But coming back to what you said about ego, I think it is important to have ego because the guy who backs himself is the guy that makes it. There's the fine line between being too full of pride and being arrogant, but then not backing yourself. And it's such a hard line to try and work. And I think when I look at myself personally, I haven't done enough in life to feel like I could be arrogant. If that makes sense. And yet one of the most common comments that I hear in my life is, oh, wow, I used to think you were so arrogant. And for me, it's defense, right? I was a little boy, glasses and a scrawny bull. And so if I had a faster mouth than you and I could talk confident, then you couldn't hurt me, right? So it was just defense. And now I'm hoping that as I develop it, it becomes more of a quiet confidence.
But you know what's also fascinating is because people would say that you were egotistical or arrogant or whatever, but it's also a reflection on them because let's say you were quick in defense with your mouth or whatever, or you had a quick tongue. So people felt threatened by you. So what's an attack on you that they can do? They can say, oh, this guy's got an ego.
There we go.
I know personally, I'm pretty standoffish with new people that I meet. So people might think that, and I've heard this, that, oh, I just thought you were so arrogant. But it was just because I don't really open up for people until I really get to know them. So both of our things was maybe actually us being vulnerable, because if you look at me being standoffish to people, is actually maybe I've been hurt before, so I don't want to let people in case I get hurt. Whereas you felt maybe that you had a scrawny build or whatever, so you were then defensive, and then you came off arrogant, whereas actually it was the inverse.
Yes, 100%. And then there's still that line you have to try and work of how much do you back yourself and what do you want to believe about yourself? What do you want to declare? And I would rather go my whole life telling everyone that can hear me that I am the best and the strongest, and the quickest and the best looking and back myself my whole life and get to the end of my life to realize I was only ever average than get to the end of my life and not have amounted to not have become the titan that I could have been because I didn't believe it of myself. And so I would rather go that way than the other.
Yeah.
And then people can take that as they want.
Yeah, and I think it's also ego because of, if we look at like ego and id and psychology, the negative association with ego is not similar to confidence. Like if you say to someone they're confident, people might not think, okay, they're arrogant or they've got an ego. So I think it's also you back yourself, you've got confidence in your ability to do something or at least find a way to be able to do something. So it's, yes, you've got an ego, but it's not an ego as I know I'm better than anyone, as in they are bad people. So, you can say I'm better than someone else because I'm willing to maybe work harder. I'm willing to study more to be able to find out a way. You will, like, let's say there's someone that has inherent talent that is superior to yours. You'll still think you're better than them because irrespective of talent, I know I can outwork them. I can be more diligent. I can be more focused on achieving to, outsurmount their amount of, performance. It's not
I can still
looking
get the
down
scoreboard.
on them.
I can still get a scoreboard win.
Yes.
You might be more talented than me, but I'm going to work harder than you, and then the scoreboard's going to reflect that.
Yeah. And it's also backing yourself, and people maybe who are insecure might view it as egotistical and that you're looking down on them. But just because you believe in yourself, it doesn't mean now that you're judging the person that's maybe not trying or the person that's, obviously if you're trying to help people and all of that, we look at it differently. But if you think, I'm better than that guy, I'll do better than him. It's not saying, oh, that guy sucks. It's not saying that guy is a bad person.
Just that I'm competitive and I'm going to use that. And my self-talk is going to be such that it's going to benefit me. I'm going to believe what's in my benefit to believe. So if I believe that I'm good, I'm going to perform like I believe that. And so I just want my self-talk to be as enhancing as possible. I want it to build me, not break me. And I think that's one of the big things that guys struggle with, is that their self-talk and their identity is such that they don't back themselves. And then they have experiences that would, back up that belief. And then it's this perpetuating cycle that they don't break out of. And if they can start to change that mentality, they can change their trajectory. And what it takes is, once again, Alex Hormozi quote, stacking wins, right? And so I think that's a big part of what we try and find is where can we get those wins. We shape our software, right? We take in new information, new worldview. I can download it, I can process it, I can make it my own, and I can apply it to the world around me. So we read certain books like As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. It's like an old book, I think it's like 80 or 90 years old. It's like 40 pages, but he articulates so effectively that you are and your surroundings become what you believe about yourself, both consciously and subconsciously. So it's the first book that a guy who works with me has to go and read. I love Goggins, Can't Hurt Me, because it's just a kick in the ass, right? You think you're working hard, you think that you've got a reason to take it easy, and he says, no, like I ran on broken legs. What are you gonna do, boy? Are you gonna carry the boats or not? So that's a big motivation. And then we try and build it in such a way that those habits are habits that you can carry forward easily, right? So James Clear, Atomic Habits, also crazy good for just habit stacking, right? Building out daily routines that build you as an individual rather than breaking you down and make it easy to carry forward. Right? So I think that software is good.
Speaking on those habits and having systems in place to achieve what you want, I was recently chatting to someone. I'll try to be as least specific as possible with who it was. But I was chatting to someone and I said, this is my morning routine. And I won't say what my morning routine is because it's self-aggrandizing. I feel like it's like trying to brag that I've, better than someone else.
I'd be very interested to hear what it is.
Okay, so then I'll say it. So usually it'll be like 4 a.m. wake up, journal and have coffee from 4 to 5.
Cool.
Take the dogs for a run and walk 5 to 5:30.
Cool.
Then go to gym I'll get there. It's like 5 minutes away. So I'll get there, let's say 6:20 to 7, gym for an hour, come home, shower, 7:30, I'm working.
Love it.
So like that's my routine. And I was telling this person and they were like, that's a bit hectic. Don't you want to take it a bit easier? And I was just like,
to what end? What's that going to get me?
Yeah, how is that going to help me?
Yeah.
I understand there are certain times where you have to be more flexible with your routine. If you're doing certain things, if you're traveling, if you do, like, I understand that.
Yeah.
But this is my Monday to Friday routine that helps me get more done in my day.
Yeah.
Just because maybe you're feeling insecure about your own routine that you have to then say, I must take it easy. Like, I'm not saying anything about your routine.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't even try and say, maybe wake up early. Like, I said nothing because I'm not in a position where I want to judge anyone.
But I have goals and I want to get to those goals. And so that's what I have to use to get to those goals. You might not have the same goals, and that's fine. But I think as a guy, it's my responsibility to be as effective as possible, to be as powerful as possible. That's how I become powerful. And that's what I'm going to do to become powerful. You don't have to want to be powerful. But then I won't see you at the top.
How was your relationship with your parents in terms of how you were raised? That obviously now you maybe realize, like, for me personally, very strict militant dad and pretty strict mom as well. Yeah. She was a bit more understanding, being a woman. She's a bit more maternal. She sees how my dad's very strict. So she's also kind of, plays that, let me help him out at varsity. If he needs a bit more money, I'll send him more money. Whereas my dad's like, bro, I gave you money for the month. That is it. So how was your parents?
So my parents were, front row elders in the church, Christians. So I was raised in what was a very strict household originally in my formative years. And then when I got to varsity, I've always had a very open relationship with my parents. So, I was still partying, drugging, chasing girls, all the rest. But I would tell my mom about it in the morning. Like, oh, mom, I had such a rough night. We were doing lines. And she would have to be like, I'm praying for you. I hope you're going to stay wise. But it kept a very open relationship. So I can't fault my parents at all for any of my decision making. What I've got to commend them on is the fact that they were able to retain the relationship while keeping their own values very set. They didn't pull back on their own boundaries, but they still made sure that I knew that I was loved and cherished and could always come home, and they would always come and get me. Right. I had an incident where I was ambushed. Some guys tried to take me out, and I ended up shooting my way out of it and ended up in jail for what should have been the weekend. I had one phone call and I called home.
Was this why you advised you?
No, this was last year, February. Okay. While I was doing my articles in George.
Okay.
I had just broken up with a girl who I was planning to get engaged to, had the ring, ended up breaking up with her and hadn't gone out in kind of 2 or 3 years. And there was a social event that was coming up, and I thought, flip, let me just go and let loose a little bit. And as I was going home, because the Ubers had stopped running, I was only 2-3 kilometers away from home. I started walking home. These 3 guys jumped me and surrounded me, and the one guy tried to stab me in the neck with a butcher knife. And I managed to put some rounds into him and then kept him alive and got a cop car flag down. But I wasn't going to be in jail for the weekend. And called mom because my sister was with her, and she's a lawyer, so I could get her to help me out. But I think it just goes to show the quality of the relationship when shit hits the fan and you call your team. So I think my family has remained my team. We're big on family. And I think that just goes to show the quality of the relationship there. Always got a base there.
And that's interesting thinking about it. So, a lot of people will say, you as your parents had that open line of communication, like as long as I just want to know you were safe, like rather I want to know about what you're doing. Even if I maybe don't agree with it, I want to know. Whereas there's other families, and I was more raised like this, where it was kind of naive. It's ignorance is bliss. And then people that, like, let's say, I know a lot of people that were also very, like, let's say daughters and sons of ministers who then retaliate against that because you raised so close to the church, right? And then people say no, don't, but then they still retaliate.
No one is sneaky as a pastor's child. No one can sneak around like a pastor's child can.
But that's also the thing is they might have been doing the same things. So it brings up the question, it's not really the nurture aspect of it, because it's pretty much the nature, it's the genetics, because you who had the open line of communication, who could say, you know what, I made a mistake, I did X, Y, and Z, versus the person that said or has to pretend that they're not doing anything or has to hide the fact, the same thing is still being done.
Yeah. I think there's still an aspect of personal responsibility, and there may be an aspect of nurturing that impacts your worldview and the decisions you make, but I think it still is going to come down to that personal responsibility. There's a saying, I know two brothers. One's an alcoholic, the other isn't. And when I ask them why, they both say, but because my father was an alcoholic. And I think that's an interesting one. It's still going to come down to your personal decisions in that process, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I've seen even just the difference between my brother and I. The older we've gotten, I would say, the more similar and the more we've have in common.
Yeah.
But it's just seeing how same household. But I was watching a very interesting interview where it was saying they were they weren't twins. They said they were a year apart. I think they were very close in age.
Yeah.
And the guy, it was a psychologist saying they weren't raised by the same parents because they're a year apart. So, and they were different genders, it was a boy and a girl.
Mm-hmm.
So the way your parents are going to show up for the boy in that particular time period, in that particular day is different to how they show up for the other person. So yes, they might still be good parents in both, but the way they show up will be slightly different. And that's just fascinating. You have different parents.
Yeah.
Because I'm 3 years younger than my brother. So I know I was raised differently. My parents' ability or inability or whatever to deal with certain things definitely changed through those 3 years.
They're learning too as they go along. And as we've become adults now, we realize they're still kids. They're still the same person. They've just now got different responsibilities and they have to try and figure it out and juggle it out. And like you said about with regards to the teachers, when you're a youngster, you look at these adults and you think like they must have their life together by now. They know what's going on. And then you get to adulthood and you're like, man, I haven't got a clue what is going on. This is crazy.
And I think, but that's also what I love about life and about being human is every day is some sort of journey of self-discovery, presents different challenges. No matter how much self-work you're doing, there's always more to be done. There's always traumas or you might not even know that it's a trauma or whatever, but it's certain things that pop up and you're like, well, why am I feeling like this? Regardless of how much introspection you try to do, because there's different situations that arise constantly. So to deal with those and to learn, I find it enjoying. I find enjoyment in being able to, try and seek to find answers. And then the more you seek, the more you realize actually you can't really find the answers. It's just about working through it.
I've got loads of questions and I don't have too many answers yet.
Yeah. And I think but that's having the questions is a good first step.
Yeah.
Because I know lots of people who just don't ask questions, who just don't inquire about why is the world like this? Why am I like this? Why are my parents like that? And just not asking questions. And I don't know if it's like fear of finding out what you think is reality isn't.
Yeah.
Because everyone's reality is different.
Ignorance is bliss, like you said.
Yeah.
That's out of the Matrix, I think. Is that
maybe.
first?
But it ties in perfectly with the Matrix. Is people happily live in a Matrix and live in a conditioned life because it's easier or they're comfortable in it or it's too much work to have to try to get out of it.
And it's scary. If you realize that things aren't how you think they are and you realize that life is tough and that maybe life's going to get harder, maybe the things on the horizon that you should be ready for, you have to take different action. And nobody wants to have to be training every single day. We'd rather be watching the sport every single day. And there is a sport we could watch every single day. If you want to distract yourself, if you want to immerse yourself into that culture, you can sports bet and watch sport all day, every day. There's a sport on for you, right? And I think it's the fall of Rome with Wi-Fi. Society is busy collapsing. Our money power is going to zero. The barbarians crossing the borders, famine in the streets, and everyone's at the Colosseum watching the game, screaming for their chariot race.
I was just watching whatever show on Prime about the Colosseum and about the fighting, but it's more the aspect of the heads of the different horses and chariots and whatever, and like the factions and betting on the races and the fights and all of that. And the one thing was the poor people were at the gates revolting because they didn't have food and they weren't being given food. And what they did was they were at the gates revolting they started a race. There wasn't a race plan, but then they went and started a race. And all the poor people were like, there's no race plan today. Let's go check what's going on. And then they stopped revolting about the lack of food.
Yeah.
And that's what people do today. There's so much injustice, but as long as I can be entertained, I don't need to worry about the injustice.
You want to keep your population placid. Cheap entertainment, cheap sugar, pornography.
Yeah.
Right? Keep your men out of the game, keep them distracted, watching the gladiators, right? Never putting their heads up to see their society crumble around them. And I think that's where we're headed very, very quickly in all aspects. Every indication of an empire about to collapse are very, very prevalent today. An obsession with sex is one of them. So the fact that pornography is as prevalent as it is today, our series, our movies, our Instagram reels, right? Everywhere you look, sex, getting riled up, getting primed. But our generation is actually having the least sex out of the last 200 years. That's crazy.
I think it's also because maybe porn has major expectations, thinking you're going to get what's on porn. Then you realize, oh, it's not. Or it's built up some mental messed up blocks or whatever.
There's something called violation arousal, which is interesting. There's a dopamine play and then there's this violation arousal, which is essentially that you get turned on by more hectic porn. So your taste starts to get warped. So a normal, wholesome, loving relationship, good, wholesome sex doesn't do it for you anymore, right? So you're not even getting as aroused as you should be. So now you've got ED, right? And then you're ashamed. You don't want to talk about it. You don't want to do the work to change it. And so you keep watching porn and stop having sex, right? Or you worry that you can't perform because you're comparing yourself to the big dicks in the porn videos, right? And you're comparing your girl to the stunner in the porn videos. It's not the same. The dopamine doesn't hit, and so you still aren't getting what you need.
And I think that's the biggest thing about porn is you have built up this expectation, and that's also what ejaculation without a partner, without a proper relationship is going to do. If it's without the partner, if it's by yourself, your dopamine levels spike so high, and then after you finish, they drop way below zero. That's why there's that, like what people would call like post-nut clarity or whatever, or the guys, you see these memes or whatever where it's like when you realize what page of Pornhub you're on, you know, after you finished or whatever. It's like and then you like
you realize what you're watching and you're like, what is this?
And then you like regret it, you're sad, you're angry, and it's because your dopamine is dropped below zero or below baseline.
That's it. And it's selfish. It's completely self-gratifying. There's no unity in it. And there's no energy back. It's just energy out, right? You're emptying your tank. And there's a book called, you would definitely have heard of it, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, right? Andrew Carnegie owns 30%.
I think, okay, the book's downstairs. I've got it here, yeah.
So Andrew Carnegie owns 30% of the American steel industry at the time. He's a titan. He says to Napoleon, and actually making a movie about it at the moment, go and interview these titans of industry and work out what they all do that drives them, that primes them for success. And he writes 2 chapters that I have incorporated into the program. The first one is the power of positive affirmation, super powerful, and I can get into that in a moment. But the next one is retaining your seed, sexual transmutation. As a man, you have this power to create, and it can either be creating with your efforts in everyday life, or it can be creating life. But there's an energy that we have, and what our young men are doing, what most men are doing now, is tapping their tank to empty every single day. I want that dog in me. I want to walk around life ready to rip heads off. For me to be able to stand on a stage in front of 1,000 high school boys and tell them not to be wankers takes a bit of confidence.
And
right?
you need to also not be one.
It has to be authentic. Because the teenagers can smell it out. They know if you fake, right?
But also energy, you feel it.
Yeah.
And they can pick up like, oh, this guy is weak.
Yeah, I think there might even be some kind of pheromone release that guys can pick up, that women can pick up.
And like that's when people talk about aura, all of these things. But our bodies do radiate energy. 100%.
And I think you tap your tank and you're just low energy. You don't have the power you would otherwise have. So I think that's a massive weapon for men to be more effective in life. So when I'm telling guys to get rid of porn, it's with intent. There's reason there. I mean, other things like cannabis. If you're a stone all day, it's never going to make you better. Cannabis will never take you from 80 to 90%. And I'm talking as a wake and bake stoner for a decade. It's only ever going to make you functional, but less effective. You can go through life stoned.
In everything, it will reduce.
But it's never going to make you better.
Yeah, right? Exactly. It maybe won't make you, like, let's say you smoke once a month on a Saturday night with your friends.
I don't have a problem with that.
That's not going to make you worse of a person.
Yeah.
But it will, if you're doing it, even if it's every night,
then
it will
done.
make you in some way a bit lazier, a bit slower, less driven,
apathetic. It crushes your ambition. It crushes your drive. And that's just the effective measure of it, right? Alcohol as well is never going to make you better. Now, am I anti-alcohol? No. At a wedding, I'm going to be on the dance floor until the end of the night. Champagne and tequila, let's go. And I'll back that, right? But I think we have to analyze every substance and realize that it's your relationship with the substance that's the problem. And then what is the net benefit of the substance for me? If I'm in a season of growth and development, then I'm 0 on alcohol. I'm 0 on cannabis. Another substance, nicotine, has some benefits, right? But it will crush your thiamine and it'll drop your ATP, which is your energy, right? So you don't want to be too hard on nicotine either. And you never want to have a crutch. You need to be sovereign. As soon as you have something that has a hold on you, it's a problem. It needs to go. Just because it has a hold on you and you're supposed to be sovereign.
And that's also why, I like to put myself in positions of having to go through pain by not doing something. Because I don't want to be controlled by anything. And it's not because I was a drug addict or an alcoholic or whatever. It's just because I like to know that I can go out with friends and not have alcohol. I like to have the ability to be confident enough without alcohol.
And then when you do that for an extended period, you develop the relationship with somebody who can say no to himself. You've had power over self, right? So you have high internal power, and then you get to apply that because you have the confidence, you have that stack of wins that gets applied to your external environment.
See, that's where something like bodybuilding is a great first few steps, because you cannot cheat on your diet. Otherwise, you won't look good enough on stage. So you have to have that control with one of the most addictive substances or things on the world. I mean, food is for me the absolute most addictive thing that 100%. I've ever had to try and fight. And I think it's almost for every human.
Three massive levers that if you can not pull, make a difference. If you can control your sex, and if you can control what you say, and if you can control what you eat, you dialed. Those are your 3 massive struggles, right, as an individual. And then the other thing that Napoleon Hill talks about in terms of being as effective as possible and setting yourself up for success, that I think is great, is that he talks about positive affirmation. And it's interesting to me because off the cusp, you're like, oh, how can positive affirmation be effective? But if we analyze different worldviews, the Christians will call it faith, right? I declare something, I believe something without seeing it, and then it comes to fruition, right? In medicine, we talk about the placebo effect, right? Any kind of biomedical studies take placebo effect into account because it's so prevalent, right? A guy who has cancer is taking sugar tablets and getting healed.
Because you believe you're taking the right thing.
Right? The crystal rubbers will call it manifesting. So completely different worldviews, not at all related, are all saying the same thing. If I believe something and declare something and focus on something, and maybe it's just because I focus on it, right? Maybe it's just because what I focus on grows. But there seems to be power in that intent. So
if we look at like the book like The Secret, if we look at, certain phrases like synchronicity and all of it, actually, if people want to get airy-fairy about certain things, it's since I started this business, if I use it as an example, I want to have in every major city a Jesster Studios podcast studio, right? So every single day when I'm journaling, I write down, and it's just been the same thing. It's 3 studios by 2026. And I write that every single day. And people will say that's manifestation. Yes, in a sense it is, but it's not.
But why is it working?
It's not a vision board that I look at every day and I want it to work. It's I write it down, I think about it, and I take actionable steps every single day to make it a reality. Is this, and it's just thinking about it and that positive affirmation that, the cycle of thinking positively makes every action to a large degree more positive. And those positive actions make things better. Seeing that things get better makes you be more positive. And then seeing, okay, making this decision helps me further along the journey on the goal. And that's what manifestation is. It's just those daily actionable steps in everything towards an end that you're looking for.
And so because you're reminding yourself of your goal every single day, you take steps every single day that are in that direction. And as humans, we have short-term memory. So by reminding yourself every single day, it sets up your direction for the day. And it flips back to the work we do in the program, and it's exactly with that mindset. The first thing I do with every guy I work with is we find our why. Simon Sinek writes that start with why, right? And we ask 9 questions, and one of the questions is, how do you make money? Another one is, what are you specialized in? What are you skilled in that's highly specialized that the average guy isn't? So for me personally, just a good example, I think that guys are supposed to be protectors. So personally, I want to be effective in combat. Not the best fighter, I'm not the fittest fighter, but I'm going to try, right? And so when I'm deciding, am I going to get out of bed at 5 a.m. to go to CrossFit before work, I need to be able to survive the fight because I'm trying to be him, that guy who's effective in combat. And so I do. And it pulls me towards my goal.
And I think that's also a good thing is all you need to do is picture the person you want to be and just do things that that person would be doing.
That's it.
It's so easy.
And so we build out these 9 questions and we actually build out a vision board. Why? Because every single morning I want to remind myself who I'm trying to be. And it's actually the desktop on my laptop. There's a guy with an AR rifle and a Malinois. So before I ever had a Malinois, that picture was on my laptop. Now I have my Malinois. We've done our close quarter combat training and our tracking work. I had a picture of a guy on a stage. Because for me, how do you have impact on other people's lives is question 2. For me, I want to stand on a stage speaking to the next generation of fighting age males, right? I've got Maximus from Gladiator because he's like this leader figure, right? He rises up against the society that is, and he gets to die for his cause, but he gets to be this leader. I'm like, man, I want to be that guy.
And what's cool is you're doing it for the everyday person, the same way he was. He was representing the slaves, representing the people who were being stood on.
Yeah.
And because the people that you're working with are the people that are being stood on by society, and society has stood on them to believe that what they're doing isn't a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you use the word slave, and I think that people don't like to hear it, but I think today you were paid a living, you were given a house and food as a slave. Most people's wages get them a house and food. I think that in today's society, we've been distracted by the games and by theater, but we're, for all intents and purposes, slaves in a system. Like we're pretty much locked in as you could be.
Very difficult to not be a slave. I never wanted to be told what I have to wear.
Yeah.
I never wanted to be told that I have to come in at certain hours.
Yeah.
So yes, now I still don't have to get told what I can wear. I can wear anything I want. If my clients don't like the fact that I'm a bit more, I just want to be comfortable and they don't want to come to my studio because of that, well then don't be a client.
Yeah.
But I'm still a slave to my job because I want the growth.
Yeah.
I want, the expansion.
But you've chosen that.
But also I'm listening to a book now, Buy Back Your Time.
Yes.
And that's also what I want to do is, yes, I want the growth. I want the expansion, but at what cost? Not to the cost of my freedom in the sense of time, because that is the biggest thing. My time and my attention.
That's all we have in life, time and attention. And we give it away too easily. And one of the things that I say to all the youngsters, how like effective practical steps to cut off porn. One of them is get your attention back. Stop following girls just because they're hot. If you can't message her today and say coffee, and she says, yes, please, why are you following her? You're a fanboy. She's got your attention for free. You're getting sexually primed, wired, going to whack off to some porn, not getting anything out of the relationship, except now you've lost time and attention and energy. Yeah. Right? And to just cut that attention off, to get back your time and your attention, I think is massive. But going back to, like you said, writing down that goal, right, that vision, that affirmation, I think is massive. And so we focus on our why, right? We have this board that we've built of who we want to be. Who am I trying to be 3 to 5 years from now? And so what is the daily steps I need to take today to get there? It's a good reminder. And then we declare who we are, right? I start off my day by reminding myself what I am before society kicks me in the nuts, right? Before I get out into traffic and I get angry, or someone at work tells me I suck, because otherwise I become reactive to that. So it's to become proactive. Who am I? Well, I've told myself every single day for 5 years that I have a spirit of love, of power, and of self-control, right? And so when I have the temptation to watch porn, I've already told myself, I already believe internally that I have self-control. I'm not a slave to
the person I am wouldn't do that, so I'm not going to do it.
And I've decided that. I start my day off by deciding that. And then the next thing that we do is we practice that gratitude.
And I think that's also something that a lot of people believe is, but that's just the way I am. And we have the ability to make a full 180 in who we are as people. We are not set in a particular way. Even if you went through as much trauma there was in the world, that can actually then be the impetus to get you to, make the changes. But a lot of people will just be stuck in their negativity, stuck in their problems. And they'll just be like, but it's too much effort to get out. And then once you realize the small little things that you do has massive benefits because it's like literally it's like dominoes.
Yeah. The catalyst for change. I think our self-talk is huge, and I think it's important to also recognize what's going right. There seems to be some backing for wiring your brain to dwell on what is going right, and consequently not being as anxious or depressed as you would otherwise have been, right? To get yourself out of that funk.
I think that's why things like stoicism are so incredibly apt for our society today. And I think that's why it's made a massive, there's been a big insurgency for it, is because we live in a world where we can control basically nothing other than our perceptions.
Yes.
And that is the only thing we need to focus on.
Yeah.
How well this podcast is received, big whoop. I'm going to at least try to be present in the conversation with you. How much traffic there is not within my control. So getting angry about it, pointless. I cannot control inflation. So moaning about it, worrying about it, that's not going to help. Yes, maybe take actionable steps.
Yes.
But there's just so much that in our world today is beneficial with more of a stoic mindset.
100%. Feeling the emotion, but not being the emotion. Acting from a pragmatic, logical standpoint rather than being emotionally reactive. Massive. Such an awesome skill set to have. And then it's also the flip of the coin of hedonism, right? I mean, the do as thou will, do what brings you pleasure in the now. You put out some good content, I think this morning, that I watched talking about chasing instant gratification and just not getting anywhere because of it, right? Because you're stuck in that cycle of doing what feels good right now. And that's a hedonist mindset, right? Do as thou will is, that's Aleister Crowley. He was one of the founders of the Satanic Church. Is do what you want to do. Chase a short-term pleasure. It's actually insidious in nature because it cuts your potential. Until you are able to put away short-term pleasure and chase something better than yourself, right? Because if you're chasing short-term pleasure, it's putting myself as my highest goal, just how I feel right now. If I'm a stoic, and if I'm, in my thinking at least, a high-value man, because I think value is how much you can put out into the world in terms of your ability to create, it's because I'm chasing something bigger than myself. I'm chasing a purpose that's more than myself. And I think that's when boys become men, is when they pick up the responsibility that is greater than themselves. Right. So I think that stoic mindset is pivotal.
Yeah. I think there's also a misconception of stoicism is people think maybe you're emotionless, or people think that like stoicism in terms of philosophy, because I've tried to do like a deep dive into many different schools of thought. But it's accept every single human because they are all as much part of this world as you are. So everyone is equal. Understand that person is the way they are because of all the experiences. You would be the same if you were in their shoes. So don't judge. Work together for the common good to thrive together. Understand your emotion. Don't push them aside. Understand them. Don't let them control you. But also, don't think bad on yourself for having certain emotions, because you actually aren't really in control of your emotion, the arisement of them, but then you're obviously in the control of how you deal with them once they've arisen.
Yeah. No, 100%. 100%.
So Goggin challenge, bro. I still need to do it. In closing, I'm going to, I promise you, March next year. But how are we in August already?
This year's gone by, man. And I look at what I've done this year and I'm just feel like I haven't done enough.
And I think that's also a big indication. I don't want to be the person at the end of the year, because I like to, obviously, every year I go to the same place in the Eastern Cape with my parents, and now with my dogs, just because of the size of the dogs and everything, I go in my own car and my parents go in their car and we meet each other there. But it's always like a reflective time period of just driving there by myself. It's like 11, 12-hour drive, when I'm just reflecting on the year. And it's nice to look back on the growth that there's been in the year, be it emotional, be it business, physical, whatever. And I don't want to be the person at the end of the year. Now you're going back home for the new January, the new year, and it's like, well, what did I accomplish this year?
Yeah. And then starting the year out again and staying in the same place. Got to keep moving forward and actually pull the levers that actually change, right? Not just get stuck in being busy, but actually doing what actually moves the levers forward. Goggins Challenge, awesome event. Started out of me needing to build my mindset. The first year, I didn't feel that I was fit enough to take on the challenge. And so I went from, I had run 7 kilometers twice between the 1st of January and the 1st of June. And I said to my parents, for this next month, I'm going to run 10 kilometers every single day. And my dad laughed at me, but I got it done. No matter what I'd been doing the rest of the day, I would get home at 10 p.m. My headlight was on, and I'd go out into the reserve and get it done. And so I built that out the first year. And that was a massive turning point for my mindset. Right? My personal identity, my growth there was crazy. And then the next year, I put out an Instagram ad and I said, you can win a free entry to come and do Goggins Challenge. And there were 8 winners and they all came to do it. And we were the first group of Goggins Challenge. And that was 4 years ago now. And this last year we were at 85
amazing
challenges, and have just kept on building it out from there. You meet the best people, all the same kind of mindset. And because you're starting every lap together, there's a very cohesive group dynamic, right? Of keeping each other going. No matter how fast or slow you are, you start together. And then, you're eating together, you cooling down, having a nap for half an hour and going again. And so the energy is just contagious. It's the most fun at an event that I've
And as
I've
a
had.
man, you need to be surrounded with like-minded people who are striving for, or maybe not like-minded. Maybe you need to
100%.
be surrounded with people that are obviously, for some people, thinking more productive, being more healthy, doing all of these things. But you need to surround yourself with people that are the people you want to become.
100%. Yeah, and I think that's the third leg of the program. We add Vantage. We change our mindset. We introduce new information that can change our perspicacity, right? We overhaul our identity. We change who we are and the relationship that we have with the man in the mirror. And then we join a gang. You need to be in community because as humans, we're community people, right? The lone wolf dies, the pack survives. And if you can find guys who are ahead of you and whose momentum can pull you forward, it makes it easier. You're in a slipstream, right? If you look at the guys on the Tour de France, the guy who is on a breakaway, he's struggling, but the group's coming up behind him because they're together, right? So the group works, and finding guys in the same mindset, like yourself, is powerful. So it's been a pleasure to get to know you as well. It's been a pleasure to come and talk to you. So thanks for having me on. It's been
I know you're here for like a very short time, so I appreciate you coming through. I'm very glad we got it done.
Yeah.
So now there's no reason why I can't do Goggins Challenge.
You got to.
If you come here for this, I have to do it. So I'm going to make sure that I have nothing planned around then, because as a dog owner, also
my dog just had surgery on Monday, Belgium, Illinois. So he's the busiest flipping dog in the world.
My mate's got 3, so I know.
Unreal. And just wouldn't stop running. And then he seems to have jumped a fence and got his foot caught and now snapped an ACL. So had the surgeries, getting some bed rest.
And keeping him in bed
is the hardest thing. Yeah. The guy just wants to go again. So hopefully in the next 3 or 5 weeks, he's going again. Has run a couple of half marathons with me. So he's got legs on him when he's healthy. Yeah. So hopefully we get back to that.
So Goggins Challenge, he's going to do it next year if he does
a couple laps. Yeah, I try not to get him to do all of it.
Yeah, not all of it,
but a couple laps he did. He ran I think 3 or 4 laps this year. But would be stoked to have you out there, man. I think a podcast mid lap,
100%.
Midnight, day 2 would be something.
100%. We'll make it big enough that Goggins one day comes to South Africa.
Let's go. That's the plan.
Because I see he does it, like he visits a few places and does with people there. So if we can get him to come to South Africa to do it, would be epic.
Awesome. Yeah. Would be awesome. Great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Bro, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming. Awesome. And thanks guys for watching. Cheers.